Hi, I'm John Cranny, here with the Georgia Straight. Happy to be your host for WOW TV for another weekly show about our newspaper. The Georgia Straight is a news and entertainment weekly in Vancouver. And right now I'm joined with our editor, Charlie Smith. So Charlie, what's happening in our paper this week?
Oh, there's a lot going on, John, and it's great to have you here on WOW TV. Um, One of the big stories this week in Vancouver is festivals. So you've got one of my favorites is Indian Summer, and this is a literary, music, food, cultural. It kind of runs the gamut, and it celebrates India, but it takes place here in Vancouver. It's at a multitude of venues, and it's primarily a literary festival, but there's also a lot of other components. It's a very popular festival. It aims high. It's really something worth checking out. And there's a smorgasbord of events that takes place from July 3rd to July 12th.
Excellent. And which writers are you looking forward to hearing from?
Well, I think one of the writers I'm looking forward to is Rana Dasgupta, who's the author of a new book called Capital, which looks at Delhi in the 21st century. And he's actually an Anglo-Indian writer, born in Britain, with a Bengali father and a British mother. He's written two novels, and this is his first nonfiction book. It's a big book. And he moved to Delhi because he fell in love with a woman in Delhi. He was actually living in New Jersey at the time. And he moved there in 2000, and he's been there ever since. It's 2014 now. So he's witnessed massive changes that have taken place in Delhi with the rise of capitalism, the explosion of the Indian economy. Now it appears the bubble may have burst, so there are questions where things go from here. Massive migration. We're seeing this around the world, actually, with the migration of people from rural to urban. So sometimes it's between countries, where you'll see people coming from rural Punjab and moving to Surrey or something like that. Or sometimes it's within countries, where you see the massive exodus from the rural areas of China to cities like Shanghai or Shenzhen. So he's looking at it from the perspective of Delhi, which is an old, important city that has gone through many changes through the history. Because the one thing about northern India is it's been a center of conquest. Like, many years ago, Alexander the Great came in, the Mughals came in, you had the British colonial period, you had the capital, which was the old British capital in India, was in Calcutta, and then it was moved to Delhi. Then you had partition when Pakistan and India were created, and that was accompanied by massive violence where upwards of 1 million people died in 1947. And then from there, many of the refugees who were often Hindus or Sikhs from the Pakistan side of the border, they've settled in Delhi. And then in 1984, they had another outbreak of cataclysmic violence, which occurred when Indira Gandhi, the prime minister, was murdered. And that was followed by a slaughter of Sikhs, because it was the Sikh bodyguards who murdered the prime minister. But at the same time, she had sent the troops into the Golden Temple in Amritsar in Punjab. So there was this long period leading up to this wholesale slaughter. And then more recently, in 2012, in December, there's a very, very famous rape, which triggered a women's rights movement in India. So Rana Dasgupta has looked at the evolution of Delhi, which is a very interesting city in a lot of ways, in light of capitalism, and he's saying that capitalism is evolving in different ways. A lot of people look at cities like Shanghai or Delhi or Lagos, Nigeria, or Rio de Janeiro, these cities in megalopolises in the emerging world, and they think that, oh, they're just replicating what's happened in London, what's happened in Washington, D.C., what's happened in New York, but they're just a little bit behind. And Rana Dasgupta challenges that notion, and he says that the world is actually diverging in different ways. The other interesting thing that I'm looking forward to hearing him talk about is the Indian election, because you've just had the election of a new prime minister, Narendra Modi, who's seen as a bit of a strong man, kind of hardcore capitalist, comes from a party of Hindu fundamentalists in a very diverse country. There are some concerns about the potential rise of kind of religious communalism along the lines of what happened in Delhi in 1984. But at the same time, he makes the case that he doesn't think this will occur with Narendra Modi because he would become such an international pariah if that were to occur. But Rana Dasgupta is not the only writer. I've given a lot of time to him. There are many other wonderful writers worth seeing at this festival.
Sounds really interesting and worth checking out. There's also some music at the festival. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, one of the events is the poetry of Rumi, who's the Persian 13th century poet. And he is being highlighted by who is seen as one of the foremost interpreters, Coleman Barks, who's an American poet. He's actually from Chattanooga. So it's kind of amusing that this guy from Chattanooga is one of the world's authorities on interpreting this Sufi mystic in Iran, and Rumi lived in many countries. He lived in Afghanistan, he lived in Turkey, he lived in Iran. So what the Indian Summer Festival has done is they brought together all these musicians who will accompany Coleman Barks on this journey of Rumi, and this is taking place at St. Andrew's Wesley Church. The United Church is a big room. It's a beautiful venue for listening to music. So that's one of the musical events. And then another musical event, the Neil Dillon, I should probably pronounce his name, he's often called Neil Dillon Quartet, which is a jazz group, is going to be doing an event concerning the Komagata Maru at the Museum of Vancouver. And this will also be accompanied by poets and Renee Sarojini Saklikar, Pinder Dulai, both local poets. Renee Saklikar did a whole book of poetry about the Air India disaster. She's actually the wife of Adrian Dix, the leader of the New Democratic Party. So Renee Saklikar is one of the poets, Pinder Dulai, and Priscilla Upal, who's an Ontario poet. So I think that will be quite a moving event. Another major event at Indian Summer is an Iranian-American writer named Riza Aslan, who's written a book about Jesus Christ, and it was very controversial because here's a Muslim writing about Jesus Christ, and Fox TV actually really took a run at him and was highly critical. Well, his book became a #1 New York Times bestseller. Some people think it's because of all the Fox News publicity and the attacks on him. He says it was already #3 before Fox News kind of went ballistic on his book. But he's another writer. Another one I'm looking forward to is Zarka Nawaz. And Zarka Nawaz is the founder of the TV show Little Mosque on the Prairie. And she's written a memoir. She's a Muslim, lives in Regina, and she's written a book about, she's actually sold 4 TV pilots to US networks too. She's very successful. So here's a woman who's comes across or may seem like a bit of a traditional Muslim with her hijab. She's actually not that traditional. She's very funny. She says, one of her talks, she says she wants to put the fun back in fundamentalism. And, it's kind of a quip, but very progressive Muslim. And so I know many people in the Muslim community here are looking forward to seeing her speak. So you're looking at some fairly major writers at this festival and poets. But also, if you like Bollywood movies and Bollywood dance, there's free dancing next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at the atrium of Woodwards. So you can go to the Woodwards and you can, there's a hip-hop yoga, so it's all these Indian things, and then there's also some Bollywood dance moves. And I saw it a couple of years ago, and it was highly amusing to see people of all different walks of life, all different ages, doing this Bollywood dancing in the middle of the Woodwards atrium. We have some video on straight.com, and it's a lot of fun. And the other event I wanted to mention was there's one, it's called 5 by 15, and they're going to have 5 writers. It's modeled on an approach done in London. 5 writers, each speaking about whatever they want to for 15 minutes. And one of the speakers I'm looking forward to hearing is Anita Majumdar, who used to be living in the Lower Mainland as an actor, playwright, dancer. She was actually once on the cover of the Georgia Strait. I think it was in 2008 or 2009 for the Push Festival. So she's one of the speakers, as is Zarka Nawaz, as is Riza Aslan, and Ivan Coyote. And then there's also another event with a graphic novelist, Arijit Sen. And that's something John Lucas wrote about in our paper because he likes the graphic novels. So I'm talking a lot, but there's a lot going on at this festival, and it goes to the 12th.
Excellent. Well, that's great for arts.